Hello, my name is Stefan Michel. I'm the Dean of Research and Faculty here at IMD, and I have the pleasure to talk with Brian Evergreen about his new book on autonomous transformation. Hello, Brian.
Hi, Stefan. Thanks for having me.
What I like about your book to start that something that is very central is how you define profit. Let's start there before we go more into the detail of the topic of autonomous and transformation.
Well, I'm going to be paraphrasing myself now, but I would say, in the book, I talked about profit being the difference between what it costs you to make something versus what someone else is willing to pay for that thing, and from that, the idea that I think often we at profit has been combined with the idea of greed. And for one of the things I start with, as you know, in the book, was to decouple those and say that there's on one side of the spectrum, there absolutely is greed, which is money at all costs. On the other side of the spectrum, there's altruism, which is good at all costs. But for the average person working today, they're in the middle. They're neutral and they're just trying to make an honest living. And then of course, as you know, profitable good is something that I term within the to the right of neutral, where you're trying to do something good, but you're still making a profit while doing it.
Mhm. I think this profitable good. I mean, I'm a trained economist, and so I'm very intrigued by the idea because even economists know that profit maximization does not lead to happiness and well-being in a society. And so this is an interesting concept that I think guides a big part of your book. On this profitable good, when you look where we are right now, I think we are, again, everyone says it's a lot of, disruption, technological disruption, economic disruption. Um, what surprises you of what happened in the recent 1 or 2 or 3 years, and what did you see coming anyway, based on your research and your experience, before we go more into the detail of the book? So what was surprising, and what did you expect in this line?
So in my book, I wrote about how some organizations, the book being Autonomous Transformation, I talk about how we've been moving from analog to digital. Now we're moving from digital toward autonomous, not to say that organizations will be fully autonomous, but in the same way we leverage digital now in our organizations, we'll be leveraging autonomous capabilities as well. In the book, I wrote about how some organizations will push that too far, and they will remove human connection in moments that matter. And so there's a couple great examples of this. McDonald's tried it, and they announced it right around the time my book came out, actually, that they were going to have, they had their first fully autonomous drive-through where you don't interact with a human, you just interact with the machine. There were cooks in the kitchen making the food, but your interaction as a person, there's no people. And then also Klarna came out with this big announcement about how they were not going to be hiring people and they're going to be using AI for everything. And they laid off 700 people. And in the headlines, at least it read as they don't need those 700 people because of AI. And both of those, and especially in their customer support space, both of those, I think my prediction was that those would fall in line with the organizations that were going to experiment with more like lots of autonomy, and realize they may need to rebound back to preserving and sustaining human connection where it matters most in an experience between an organization and their customers. And so, soon after, McDonald's, right, announced, okay, actually, that was an interesting pilot, but we're going to keep people in our drive-through experience, and rebounded from that experiment. And which they always position experiment to their credit. Klarna, it was funny, their CEO I think it might have been in December or January of this year, put out an announcement that he said, turns out we've had a big realization that, we need human connection really, really matters. And so we're actually going to be hiring, we're still going to keep doing great things with AI, but we're going to be hiring humans into our customer, more people into our customer service department. So, and there's many more examples, but that's one of the biggest predictions that, for me has come true of what I would have anticipated would have happened. Something I have been surprised by is that, there's 27 categories of AI according to Gartner, and I was really excited about some of the other categories, not generative AI. Not to say I wasn't excited about it, but there were some other categories like spatial AI and other things that I thought, wow, that's going to be the thing that everybody's going to be talking about. And
Mhm.
so I was a little bit surprised when generative AI took off the way that it did. Some of my colleagues, we had early access to ChatGPT before it came out, and we thought it was great, but we didn't realize how viral and explosive it would be. So that was an area where I was a bit surprised.
Mhm. So everyone, I think everyone was surprised and really, almost couldn't believe it in
Yeah.
November 20. I didn't have early access, so in November 2022 it comes out almost of nothing. And I remember I was teaching in 2020 my first course on AI, and I asked the students, participants, would
Hmm.
AI be able to write an email in 3 years from now? And 50% said no, and 50% said yes. So it can now much more than writing emails. You
That's
said
right.
something interesting in terms of automation going too far and dehumanizing. I remember when I worked for a bank many moons ago, we moved away from branches
Hmm.
to ATMs. Kind of just ATMs were always there, but get rid of the branches. Just get your money at an ATM. Now, uh, some people don't know what an ATM is because they are cashless. But still, there was initially a lot of resistance because we don't want to do this with an ATM, with an automatic teller machine. But then people realized it's actually faster, it's better. I don't want to chat with someone who gives me some money. So the McDonald's example, is this an initial resistance that people overcome, or do you think again what you said? We always want to have a minimum of social contacts in our life, be it ordering a coffee or
Mhm.
fast food. So do you think it's an initial resistance, or what will be the amount of interactions we have in the future?
A really, really good question. And I think part of it has to do with what kind of future we even want to be in the first place. Like what is from a values and culture perspective, rituals. For me, I've got a family, right? And we spend a lot of time together. And the social interaction in a drive-through, if I'm at the point where I'm driving through, we don't typically eat at McDonald's, but if we're driving through Starbucks, that social interaction is not, why I get up in the morning, right? That's, if anything, sometimes they're friendly and I think, oh, thanks so much, thanks for asking me about my day. My day's great, but my son is upset about something. Right, right. So I don't necessarily always feel ready for a social interaction at a drive-through. And so, but I think for others, maybe that's a touch point, especially maybe it has to do with the idea that is someone giving me food and I want to see a person, I want to look them in the eye, I want to, maybe there's some kind of underlying idea there. I did do an interesting research. I did a survey and I asked people if you were to go to a restaurant and you could choose three different types of restaurants, one where the server who takes your order is a person, but the chef and let's say the dishwashing is all robotic, like fully automated. That's one type of restaurant. A second is that the person making your food and the server are both humans, but the dishwasher is fully robotic. And the third is no, all humans, or nothing. Right. Oh no. And then the fourth was all robotic, right? Where you speak to a robot or you put it in a little thing and it just shows up at your, little maybe Samo comes and brings you your food. And you can probably imagine, I'm guessing you can guess what they put. The majority of them put that they would at least want there was more comfortability and flexibility with the fact that the chef would be robotic, but although I'd say, which surprised me, but all of them at a minimum wanted at least that server interaction to be human. And so I do think that when we think about how as brands and as it's going to transform a bit, because if I'm at a point where I'm using an AI agent and I say, I have a party coming up Friday night, I want to make a French stew, get me everything I need. I don't care which store. I don't care if it's DoorDash. I don't want to be slowed down by having to talk to anyone, right? I just want the ingredients to show up. and I want a good recipe that I can follow. And so agents will be able to do that, I think, in the near future. And so I don't need any human connection there. But the areas where I will need human connection, I think will matter as much or more. Like even still, if I call my bank today and I have to, navigate the IVR and it won't just let me push 0 to go talk to a person. I already know all the self-automated options with my bank. So if I'm calling, it's because I needed to speak with a person because I know it's beyond that threshold. And so I think that we will need organizations to double down in the areas where human connection really matters.
Mhm. It's interesting, and I saw this when I was in Japan last year. We had this robotic server, and of course, it's fun if you see it for the first time. You take videos, but
Yes.
it's creepy, right? So it's more the attraction, but it's really strange. And then this is a question because we don't know it, or will it remain strange? So, but I want to also focus some really direct parts on your book, and what I highlighted was what you call the autonomous transformation process, where as it says human centered, and you go from envision your future, discover and rediscover, clear the digital fog. This is a wonderful expression. Maybe we have some time to talk about digital fogs. Design for inevitability, sorry, and create a more human future. Do you want to lead us in a few minutes through that cycle? Maybe starting with envision your future and discover and rediscover.
Yes. So a lot of times when we set out on any kind of AI or technology project, we begin with picking up the tool and looking around our organization and saying, how could we use this tool to make our organization better? Which makes sense to us even now, probably as I say, you go, well, yeah. But if I were to come to you and say, I'm going to do a remodel of your home, and I come to your door and you let me in, and I walk around with a hammer and I say, how am I going to make this house better with this hammer? You would think, I've made the wrong choice for a contractor for my remodel. But yet that's what we do. There's many habits we've fallen into, the habits that have been, Socrates says the unexamined life is not worth living, right? So there's many unexamined habits, buying habits, planning and strategizing for AI project habits that would be considered best practices. Things like picking up the tool and looking around. Things like, well, let's start with what problem we want to solve.
Mhm.
When I say it, it's like, oh yeah, of course we start with what problem we want to solve because we've said it so many times. But starting with a problem already limits you because you're focused on something you want to get rid of, which is different than focusing on where it is you actually want to go, what you actually want to do. You might be moving toward, there might be a better version of the value that you create, that if you move in that direction, the problems that you otherwise would have solved are no longer relevant. We've fallen into these habits. And so the first section is envision your future. Start with picking what future do I actually want to be in for myself, for my organization, for our market, and envisioning that. And envisioning is actually a skill. I think we often think of envisioning as something that is, we got to hire a big consulting firm to do for us, or something that like is, some people just have the gift of envisioning, but it's a skill just like program management or JavaScript. It takes practice. But most of us in our roles going from junior level, we're not asked to envision, we're handed a set of tasks to complete. And the better you get at completing tasks, the more you get promoted, then you manage other people completing tasks. And then all of a sudden you're thrown into an executive leadership position where the thing that got you there isn't the thing you need now. Now you need to be able to envision, where should we be headed in the first place? How could we reimagine the value that we're creating? And so that's the first section, is envisioning and emphasizing how that's a skill. And there's some more stuff baked in there, but that's the first one. And moving away from problem solving to something I call future solving. So instead of solving,
I love this expression in the book. Yes.
oh, thank you so much. I'm
Future
so glad.
solving. I love it. Yes.
And because problem solving is the craft of getting rid of what you don't want. Future solving is the craft of getting what it is that you do want. And so picking a future that you want to be in and solving for that future. And there may be problems that you're facing that are part of getting to that future. There may not be. But if you're starting with the problem mindset, you're not going to be able to see that future. You're sort of moving directionless from problem to problem instead of moving in a focused direction. So once you've done that, the discover and rediscover is because you usually don't have enough context. If you pick a really bold and ambitious idea or vision for the future, often we don't have enough context really. And we come up against that friction because if it's something that's like, wow, that would need a whole industry coalition, or, oh, I need the rest of the organization to buy off on that, it can be easy to shut down things that otherwise would be really worth pursuing. And so the discover and rediscover is really about applying systems thinking to really see the whole board of what it is that you're looking at, really understand the pieces, how they move, re-examining even, oh, there's pieces I've assumed are not movable that actually may be if I think about it a different way. And okay, there's other, there's like market forces that could be re-engineered, for example. And so that's the second piece, is like, really seeing the whole picture of what it is that you're looking at. Because if you're focused in on just a few pieces and just one small part of the board, or just your one, from a systems thinking perspective, if you're trying to make your sub part of the overall system better, it won't matter unless the interaction with the other parts of the system are improved, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really important to see the whole system. And then the third step was design for
The
inevitability.
digital fog.
Thank you. Clearing the digital fog. So clearing digital fog is really about dispelling all of the things that aren't true right now when it comes to AI. And it's funny because I felt like there was digital fog. I wrote this book before anyone had heard of ChatGPT, and I thought there was digital fog back then, but oh boy, right? It's a lot more than ever before. And so so clearing the digital fog, there's one there, and I talk about some of the logical fallacies that are taking place. One example is the appeal to authority fallacy, where if somebody is a world-class decorated, astrophysicist, for example. Like there's an example in the book of Stephen Hawking, right? Who's world-class when it comes to astrophysics. Not an expert in AI, not claiming to be an expert in AI, but there was an interview with him. I don't know if you got to that part of the book. There was an interview with him where they said, "What do you think about your new AI, voice mechanism?" And he said, "It's both great. It's very great. It's great. I'm grateful for it." And they said, "And what do you think about AI more broadly?" Right? And this is a BBC interview. And he said, "Well, the systems we have now are very helpful, but if AI were ever to become," I think he called it full AI, which by that he meant kind of self-conscious and able to set its own goals, and then it would be able to, we as humans would be at a disadvantage because it'd be able to improve on itself and replicate itself, and from an evolutionary perspective go way beyond us, right? So he's talking about hypotheticals, which is especially easy for astrophysicists, right? And so and then the next morning, the news articles that came out were, my favorite one said, the first line was, "Pity the poor meatbags," right? Like every single major publication came out with some form of, Stephen Hawking said that AI will take over. Stephen Hawking said, right? So they're using that, they're appealing to his authority as a leading expert in something that everyone respects, applying it to a field he's not an expert in, twisting his words from him saying, if that happened, it would probably not be great for us, to he thinks it's definitely going to happen. He's predicting Armageddon, which he wasn't, right? And so we have all this, and you do that with one quotation from Stephen Hawking, but then you take that across every possible opportunity, especially now with everything being even more digital. So more and more opportunities to grab a quotation from someone, twist it, and write a whole article, or do some kind of social post. And there's a lot of noise out there, and there's also the economic driver that everybody wants to be an expert in AI today, and unfortunately that it's impossible for that many people to be experts in AI. And so so there's a lot of noise, and so clearing the digital fog to understand what is actually true about these technologies, what are their actual capabilities. You need to have a level of literacy about them in order to be able to solve for how you're going to use them. So it doesn't mean you start with them and say, we're definitely going to use AI before I even know what my goal is. But having enough knowledge means that once you've defined your goal, having that literacy means that you know where or when AI or blockchain or whatever other technologies may be relevant for solving for that goal. And that's the third step. And then the fourth is design for inevitability. And so that one is really about diving deeper into what would have to be true for this goal that I have to be inevitable. So I think we had this idea of often of, well, what are the things that I would need to do, right? And that can, it's work, right? Most people miss opportunity because it's dressed in, it shows up dressed in overalls and it looks like work, right? And that, so that can be hard. But one thing that I found is if you reposition even in your thinking about a goal you're trying to achieve, of what could I do to make this goal inevitable, where there's no, like, it will absolutely happen. And if you're designing and you're thinking with that level of sort of audacity, you're going to come up with solutions that you wouldn't have otherwise come up with. And you might think, well, that's crazy. Why would that other organization do that and partner with us in that way? And you ask the question again, well, what would have to be true? Will have to be wildly profitable a proposition for them. And then, okay, what would have to be true for that? We'd have to cut them in this way. And then you can actually solve for, okay, this is a plan, or it's a strategy and a plan for making this inevitable. And it's actionable and achievable. And then the last step was leading a more human future, right? And so that one is really about how you lead people, because your strategy and your vision will only be as effective as your ability to articulate them. And so, and really to spark action. So if you have the best vision, and like, let's say I had a vision and I even have a perfect strategy for curing cancer. I finally figured it out from a strategy perspective, what we needed to do. If I couldn't motivate anyone to follow me or fund or support that vision and strategy, it wouldn't matter, right? It would die out. And so that's the three are kind of equally important. And in there, I also outlined some of the leadership traits that were seen as extracurricular in the 20th century, that now are, I think, becoming more and more obviously core curricula.
Thank you. So again, I like this because there's a logic and a narrative in all of this. And when I read it, I was asking, this is so much, like, so obvious. Would it only apply to what you call autonomous transformation? Isn't it? So part of what you say is true for innovation. Part of what you say
Yeah.
is true for system thinking. And I think you just said you wrote this before ChatGPT. So why is the title autonomous transformation? So what does the autonomous part add to your framework?
Well, it's a great question, and I've asked myself that off and on over the years. The reason I first chose autonomous transformation is because I really felt that people were tied to the digital transformation playbook, and they were struggling trying to apply it to AI, and it was not working for them. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to help people by helping them break out of the mindset of digital transformation and modernization, incremental improvement, that kind of stuff, to like, and this is new and it's a new era, and you did some great things move into the cloud, but this is not about that. This is different, right? And so that's why I wanted to write a book about autonomous transformation. And then, as my wife has said many times, I wanted, it was my first book that I was writing. And there's a temptation to try to get to the magnum opus of like, these are all of my thoughts and ideas. And I can't tell you how many things I trimmed out of there to keep it, to a readable length. But I really thought, okay, I called it the autonomous transformation process because I was thinking, in this new era, this process is the only way you're going to get value, not the only, but the most likely way that you can get value out of AI, instead of trying to reapply the digital transformation playbook, which, as we know, 87% of AI projects fail, right? And so I said, okay, this will, in this new era, be a better playbook. But you're right that the same playbook could apply. My goal was, and no pun intended, but my goal was for it to be evergreen, right? Where it could be applied, it could be applied to any era, any project. I wanted it to be something that was the foundation of a new system of leadership, and which I now, in my in my practice working with organizations around the world, I just call it future solving. It's the future solving methodology. And I no longer tie it to, other than the fact that it started in the book. But I don't necessarily, to your point, I don't necessarily tie it directly just to autonomous transformation.
Mhm. And for me, thank you for this, I think, honest answer in terms of, it's broader, or, it's more fundamental. But
Mhm.
now, I mean, something happened that is like just playing totally in your thoughts. That is, when I teach AI from a minute, I'm not a technical specialist. I come
Sure.
with a business background, and I say they're basically, from a managerial point of view, four types of AI. One is expert systems, which are not really AI, but often they are called
Right.
and sold. The second one is single purpose machine learning. The third one is generative AI. And the fourth one, which now is very controversial, is about AI agents. And I think, so when I first saw the title, I thought, okay, that's fast. So that's the book about AI agents, and you wrote it way before. And my question then is, so is this the book, even if you didn't know what is happening now in 2025? Is this a book about we should use for thinking about AI agents, and think about the human benefit and welfare in the age of agents?
Yeah, so we were building and deploying AI agents with Fortune 500 customers before anyone had heard of ChatGPT.
Okay.
So yeah, so that I wouldn't say, I don't want to try to call out and say, oh, this is the book that you need, everybody's got to read, right? Obviously, any author would love that, but I do think that it would be for anyone who is looking to set a vision and a strategy for creating new value, which is usually the hang up. I think that when people see a new technology, they skip that part, right? They jump straight to, how can we use this to, let's build capability, let's pick some low-hanging fruit, and we'll, but I always joke that low-hanging fruit gives the worst tummy ache. And because you end up
What is it? The low-hanging fruit gives the worst?
the worst tummy ache. Because you basically you skip the process of setting a vision for more value and of actually doing strategy work to just grab a low-hanging
That's
fruit and say, let's
that's
just do
cool.
the low-hanging
So
fruit. We'll
I
get a
come from
little.
a family of farmers, so I will tell them.
It's probably not true in with real fruit,
No,
right?
but
But in terms,
I love it. I love it because I use this phrase so often. So now
yeah,
you
we talk. Oh, let's just
answer.
get some. Let's get going. Let's just, that I think one of the worst things about one of the worst misconceptions about strategy is people think they never have time for it, and
Yeah.
it's the kind of thing where it's like you actually, that's the first thing you should make time for, because otherwise you can. It's very easy to burn money with AI. And so yeah, so in terms of the book, I do think that it will help organizations, and I have gotten feedback. Now there's over $20 billion of investment architected on the frameworks in the book where they've said, we're going to set a vision, then we're going to go create a reason-driven strategy for how we're actually going to achieve this vision. And so I do think, but to your point, I did not go as deep into AI agents as I even could now, or as I plan to in the future, or as I have even on my Substack, because to me, it was less about, here's AI agents, here's the architecture of AI agents, here's how to think about them. More about, all right, we're rushing forward into a new era. We're going to be using AI agents. Here's a couple examples. And I gave a couple examples of autonomous transformation in healthcare and some different industries, and said, okay, because of this new era, pause. This is how we have to think about doing envisioning and strategy, et cetera. And so, and here's how to avoid, I think I even had something in there for how to test your vendors to see if they're credible and trustworthy. I have a test in there for that. It was kind of fun. And, laying out the logical fallacies, et cetera. So it was meant to be a practical guide for any leader who wants to really lead in this era.
Mhm.
And then in terms of AI agents, yeah, I think that, there's obviously, since then, there's been other definitions that I would maybe say is makes sense that a LLM provider would want to anchor the definition of AI agents on LLMs. But there's some problems with that. Like if you have an organization where they put LLM at the center of an AI agent architecture, I just always share with folks, that's a mouth for brains agent. And you don't want a mouth for, if I were to say, that if a person, you wouldn't define a person as, a mouth plus
Mhm.
some arms, all
Mhm.
right, and legs. That would not, you need to have the brains, right, for it to be a functioning person. And so when people put LLMs at the central architectural component of a AI agent, then they're basically saying this thing can't really think. It's going to hallucinate 20 to 30% of the time. And so I do have lots of opinions on AI agents, I guess, all that to say.
Mhm. And so when you said that you wrote the book, before and worked with agents before ChatGPT and other LLMs, that also means that now what the agents improved was not the heart, but really the interface, because it's now
That's right.
become so
Yes,
the LLM becomes a translator of human language to something
yes.
that can be then that the brain can operate on, and not the other way around.
Exactly. And one of the hardest parts that we were finding was you had to create data-driven simulations of a process or even a first principle simulation of an environment or of a system to be able to let AI train and learn and using deep reinforcement learning to learn a skill,
Mhm.
essentially, to run a machine or to land a plane or all these things. And so, but the most expensive that we gotten to the point where the technology really worked to do the deep reinforcement learning and all of that. The
Mhm.
hardest bottleneck we were finding was generating the actual first principles simulation, or there wasn't enough talent in the world, scalable and at a affordable price to be able to really blow that to the scale that to the degree that we would want. And so generative AI really really helps with
Mhm.
generating first principles sim. It's not you definitely need a human pass over it to make sure it's actually accurate.
Mhm.
But it can really speed that up. And so that's a role. So like you said, the mouthpiece of the agent to be able to better understand intent, to be able to anything with text, with anything language heavy, like if you want me to summarize documents or things like that, great. That's it's helpful for all of those things. But the actual brain it's important that the language model is not accidentally substituted for the brain of the agent.
So what I clearly take away from this, also from my own teaching, is this metaphor of LLM being the mouth and not the brain and not the heart. I think that's
That's right.
that's and like with every mouth, sometimes it comes out wrongly, right? And that's what we see with
Exactly. Exactly.
LLMs. I mean, the fact that it hallucinates is part of the very features of
Yeah.
the tokenization of language. So I like this a lot. You said that you have children, and so when you have children, then you always live in different generations at the same time, right? And
Yeah,
then
that's right.
so daily you see this. So what is your and that's why I think your book on emphasizing the human part of it, human-centered technology. What do you see as a parent in terms of the future for your children, for children, maybe the future? I mean, what should they learn? How can you what can you do as a parent to protect them and enable them and enjoy life? Are you worried? Are you excited when you raise children in these crazy times?
I would say that there's definitely worry. It's I mean, I had the benefit of being raised, before anyone had smartphones, right? I was all the way, I was at college when the first smartphone was introduced, right? And so I one of the things just I wouldn't say as much worried as much as we're our goal is to be extremely intentional with raising our kids. And so for instance, we're very intentional about ourselves ever modeling screen time or looking at computers or smartphones. So there's this temptation as a family to work near them, but and be together when I can work remote and be on my laptop. But we found that then, they're young, right? They're 4 and 6. We actually have a third on the way. And so, but we found
Congratulations.
that, thank you so much. And we found that if I'm there with my computer and I'm looking at my screen, and then they want something from me, and I can't get that right now because I'm focused on something, then what that tells them is that the machine is more important than you are. And
Mhm.
so now, even though I want to be near them as much as possible, I actually, when I'm going to be working, I away, and when I'm
Mhm.
going to be near them, I'm not going to be on any screens.
Mhm.
We're actually looking at investing in buying, I don't know if they're called dumb phones now, but basically phones that just have texting, calling, GPS, like some of the basics that we've come to need in terms of navigating the world, but without any internet or social capabilities. Just to really like detox from this digital. I feel like there's this that Jonathan Haidt wrote this amazing book you're probably familiar with on the anxious generation, right? And so
Mhm.
seeing how being online, being in connected to social communities for children at a young age has really impacted their mental health. There's the mental health crisis that's happening in our youth
Right.
is not because of them. It's because of the systemic environment that that parents and schools and the world has created for them. And I don't think it's anyone to blame. I mean, no judgment for that. I just having seen that firsthand with family and loved ones saying, okay, how am I going to do that differently for my kids? So that's one. And that doesn't fully answer your question, but that's just one. The second is thinking through what rituals that are human are important to us. For example, sitting down at dinner and looking each other in the face and talking about our day is, it's so easy to just get something on Uber Eats or whatever, but it's like, no, having a home cooked meal, even if regardless of which one of us or all of us make it together, right? And then sitting down and actually, doing that together and thinking through, okay, what are the other rituals or things that are touch points as humans that are so important for learning?
Mhm.
I'd say in terms of skills, my kids, they help out with horse chores with their grandparents when they go there. They know how to bake. They know how to that we don't treat them like you're over there and we're going to do all the grown-up stuff. We include them. They know how to do laundry, right? And so I think that's really important to me is teaching them as many skills as we
Mhm.
can. And I would say honestly, social skills, unfortunately, are becoming more and more rare. And so people are always shocked when my 6-year-old, if we're out somewhere and he'll say, "So what do you do for your job?" And he'll strike up a conversation and he's not looking at a tablet and he's not, right? He's genuinely curious about everyone around him. And so, that used to be every kid, right?
Yeah.
And that's how it should be, honestly. And so, yeah, so I would say in terms of focusing on social skills, pro-social skills is a huge emphasis and focus for us. And I would say helping them determine what values, like in terms of how they treat other people and being kind and being honest. And I think those things to me, and then fostering curiosity
Mhm.
and equipping them, was it Einstein or Thoreau or one of them that said all education is self-education?
Mhm.
And so we really see it that way. So if, with any student, I'm sure you know better than anyone, if a student wants to learn something and they're motivated to learn something, they can learn the most complicated thing in the world. If they're not motivated to learn it, they can't learn the simplest thing. And so with our kids, we're trying really hard to foster curiosity and equip them with the skills to discover and explore and learn about anything that they can. And then we know, like, because AI will always be used for the automation of tasks.
Mhm.
And so if there's tasks that are repetitive and able to be automated, AI will be great for that. It would be great. It's great for like when you're exploring and you want to bounce something off of another system and get some feedback. It's great for that. But it's not going to be used for just like actually breaking through into new value creation. That's a distinctly human skill. And to come up with like economic models and social contracts between people and organizations. Like those are uniquely human traits and characteristics. And
Mhm.
so our goal is, as parents, and I think every parent I recommend, double down on the things that make us most human, the things that the ability to build relationships, the ability to be strategic, the ability to see things across systems in a way that ironically, because machines can compute so much data, right? So you could think they could see across all the systems, but not they can't zoom out the way that we can. Um, so yeah, long answer to your question, but
It's brilliant. I think it's in your next book probably on parenting in AI, and I think what you really
mm,
combine, what I also saw throughout the book is the technology and never forget the human in this and put the human first. And just what you said, I mean, I wrote this down first. I really like this, being intentional, being a role model, and
mm,
focus on the social skills, which again, some of this is is what we used to think is normal is now
it's
um
now rare. Yeah,
rare.
because
Yes,
it used to be that, you remember, I remember when you go to the doctor's office and you have an appointment, you're bored while you're waiting in the office
yeah,
because there's nothing to do. And so you look
yeah,
around, people around, or you're on the airplane. You're either going to read a book or you're
yeah,
going to talk to the person. There might be a movie, all the way at the front on a tiny little screen that you can
yeah,
choose
not
to
in Switzerland,
see.
but yes.
Yeah, okay, sure. But so so all these opportunities for fostering social skills with
Yeah,
strangers
yeah.
have effectively been eliminated from our society, and everyone's looking at their smartphones, right? So we're working on that. Yeah.
So with the last point that you raise, I really wanna close this talk, and I learned a lot, and what you said at the end, I really that resonates a lot, and I would just highlight this fostering curiosity. I think
Mm,
your book is a good example of seeing what we already know, kind of a little bit, and kind of, but
right.
in new lights. And so for me, I think that's why this is something. Again, it's not. I've never thought of that in my life, but I think, yeah, 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 of course. But you bring this together and make this connection from the technology side to the human side and back. And I think that's I had a lot of fun, and I made a lot of scratches and all of this and notes, and
Thank
so
you.
so I think and some of the very simple metaphors and stories you tell, it clearly shows also your curiosity in this process. And I think with this we come already to the end of our talk. I enjoyed it tremendously, but of course the last
Right.
word or the statement is always yours as the guest and as the author. So what are the things that you want to leave us with?
What I would say is one of my biggest focuses right now, the thing I'm most focused on is trying to I think that we have a dearth of vision in society right now. I think that we've more and more as we moved further and further from the Industrial Revolution, we become more and more operations focused as a society. When there's nothing wrong with operations, but if we only maintain the value that has been created up until now, we're not going to get new breakthroughs. And the only thing that gets us new breakthroughs is if you set about to think through and envision something new, some kind of new value that you're going to create. And so and there are people that, if the best of us aren't doing that, then we're leaving it to those who may have other values. It may not be human first. It may not be thinking through how will this make things better for society. And so rather than to sit and sort of, say, oh man, I wish somebody would come up with something that would be better for society with all these billions of dollars of capital being poured into AI, like what could you do? And I don't mean you specifically, Stefan, but
Sure.
what, if you're listening to this and thinking through, okay, what is my vision? It might be just for you personally, it might be for your team, it might be for your department, your whole organization, it could be for the whole market. But if you don't have a vision right now of what it is that you're building toward, I would challenge you to stop and think about that. And your work would likely be more interesting, more fun, more rewarding, even just in that context of a vision that you're building toward.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Brian, for writing that book, for making it available to me and to all of us. And thank you for taking the time today to talk about the book and a bit more and including parenting. I learned a lot, so thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.